The palace of Lady Serenia was unlike anything a human had ever seen. Walls of silver stone rose high above the desert, glowing faintly under the twin moons. Golden torches burned with blue fire, casting strange shadows across endless halls. And in the center of it all stood the treasure chamber, a place of legend even among her own people. Piles of riches lay stacked inside like mountains. Jewels shimmered in tall glass jars, rare metals filled golden bowls, ancient scrolls and crystal tablets lay scattered on long marble tables, each one holding secrets of lost empires. It was a room where greed could drown a man in seconds, and Serenia knew that temptation well, for she had seen countless guards fall to it before. This night was different, though. She stood in the shadows, her violet eyes watching quietly. Her human protector, Captain Arik, had been newly assigned to her. He was tall, scarred from old battles, with a quiet strength in his walk. Unlike her people, he carried no jewels, no shining weapons, only a plain steel blade strapped across his back. Serenia had left the treasure chamber unguarded on purpose. No guards, no servants, no locked doors. She wanted to see what the human would do when left alone with endless wealth. Would he reach for the glowing gems? Would he pocket gold coins? Would he betray her as others had? Her lips curved slightly, a bitter smile playing across her face. In her mind, she thought, humans are greedy. They always want more. It will not take long. Arik stepped into the chamber, his boots echoing softly against the marble floor. He stopped at the threshold, his eyes sweeping over the sea of riches. The blue firelight flickered against his face, revealing the faint surprise in his eyes. For a moment he stood still, as if the air had turned heavier. The weight of temptation was thick here, pressing against his chest. Serenia leaned forward in the shadows, her breath held tight. Arik walked slowly between the piles of treasure, his hand brushing against an ancient shield. The metal hummed faintly with old power. He looked at it but did not take it. He passed jars filled with star crystals, their glow soft as moonlight. He crouched for a moment, staring at them. His hand hovered in the air, just inches away. Serenia's heart quickened. Was this the moment he gave in? But Arik drew his hand back and stood straight again. He let out a quiet breath, shaking his head as if to dismiss a thought. Then he walked to the center of the chamber and sat down on the floor. He pulled out his blade, a plain piece of steel compared to the wealth around him. And calmly, he began to sharpen its edge, the scraping sound echoing through the silent hall. Serenia froze in the shadows, her eyes narrowing. This was not what she expected. Why would a man ignore riches that could buy him a kingdom? Arik spoke softly, though no one was meant to hear. His voice carried a rough honesty. Gold cannot save you when the blade comes. Jewels cannot protect a life. Only loyalty and steel can do that. The words struck her like an arrow. For years she had been surrounded by men who swore loyalty with words but reached for gold with their hands. Yet here sat a human, not even tempted enough to touch a single coin. Instead, he prepared himself to fight, as if guarding her mattered more than owning treasures. She felt her chest tighten, an emotion she had not planned for. Was it respect, surprise, or something else she dared not name? Her test was supposed to reveal his greed, his weakness, but instead it revealed a strength she had not expected. Her eyes lingered on him as he worked silently, the blade in his hands gleaming sharper with every stroke. From the corner of the chamber, a faint sound rose, a whisper, almost like laughter. Serenia turned quickly, but the hall was empty. She realized it was her own thought mocking her. Perhaps humans are not as simple as I believed. Arik finished his work, slid the blade back into its sheath and leaned against the cold marble floor. His eyes closed for a moment, his body at rest but his senses alert. He looked like a warrior ready to spring into action even in sleep. The riches around him glittered in silence, but none of them had touched him. Serenia remained hidden, her heart unsettled, her mind filled with questions. The night stretched on, and the treasure chamber kept its secrets. But something had already shifted. For the first time, the noblewoman looked at her human protector not as a tool, not as a servant, but as something far more dangerous. He was a man who could not be bought, a man whose loyalty weighed heavier than all the gold in the galaxy, and that made him a threat and a hope that Serenia could no longer ignore. The morning sun rose over the silver palace, sending streams of golden light across its towers. Lady Serenia stood on a balcony, her mind restless, her heart still replaying what she had seen the night before. The human protector, Captain Arik, had ignored the glittering treasures left unguarded before him. Instead of stealing, he had sharpened his sword and spoken words that echoed louder than the clash of steel. Gold cannot save you when the blade comes. Jewels cannot protect him. Life, only loyalty and steel can do that. Serenia had expected betrayal, yet she found something else. It unsettled her. It made her question the walls she had built around herself. Her people were rich in jewels and metals, but poor in trust, and now a man from another world had shown her a loyalty that shone brighter than all the gems in her chamber. She decided to test him further. If he was truly unshaken by wealth, then perhaps he could be tempted in other ways. The palace was quiet that morning. Servants moved carefully, whispering as rumors spread. Many of them distrusted the human, muttering that he would soon reveal his true colors. But Serenia's eyes searched for Arik with a strange urgency. She found him in the training yard. His plain blade clashed against a soldier's spear, sparks flying in the air. He moved with steady skill, every strike clean and precise. Even when disarmed, he used his fists, his knees, his whole body. He fought not for show, but for survival. Every motion sharp like a man who had lived through real wars. Serenia approached slowly, her violet robes brushing the ground. The soldiers stopped at once, bowing their heads. Arik only glanced at her, sweat on his brow but no fear in his eyes. "You did not touch my treasure," she said softly, her voice carrying more weight than the morning air. Arik gave a small shrug, wiping his blade clean. "It was never mine to touch," he answered. Simply, her lips curved, but it was not a smile, more a puzzle twisting in her thoughts. "Most men would not resist," she said. "Even my own kin have stolen from me." "Then they were not worth your trust," Arik replied, his voice steady. "A protector who steals is worse than an enemy." The soldiers around them exchanged shocked glances. No one dared speak to Lady Serenia with such blunt honesty. Yet she did not punish him. She did not rebuke him. Instead, she studied him. There was strength in his words, but there was also something dangerous. He spoke like an equal, not a servant. Later that day, Serenia called for a council. The nobles gathered, draped in flowing robes, each one shining with jewels heavier than their sense. They eyed Arik with thin smiles and sharp whispers. "He will betray you," one hissed. "Humans are greedy." Another sneered. But Serenia silenced them with a wave of her hand. "Last night," she said, "I left my treasure unguarded before him, and he did nothing." The nobles laughed, shaking their jeweled heads. "One night means nothing," an elder spat. "The hunger of men grows with time. He will take what he wants when your eyes are turned." Serenia's gaze darkened, but she said nothing, for even she did not fully know the truth yet. Still, her heart whispered something her mind refused to accept. Arik was different. That evening, she summoned him privately. The chamber was quiet, the air heavy with the scent of burning oils. Arik entered, bowing slightly, but his stance remained firm. Serenia circled him slowly, like a predator studying prey. "Do you not desire wealth?" she asked, her voice low. "Do you not long for jewels, for power, for glory?" Arik lifted his head, his eyes steady. "I desire peace," he said. "I desire a duty that means something, not coins that rot in a chest." His words struck her harder than a blade. Peace, meaning, duty. These were not things her kind spoke of. Her people worshipped wealth, yet here was a man who sought nothing of it. She felt a strange heat rise in her chest, an unfamiliar ache that she quickly buried. But his choice was clear. He wanted loyalty over riches, honor over gold. Suddenly, a sound echoed from beyond the chamber. A guard stumbled in, bleeding from his arm, gasping for air. "My lady! Assassins in the lower halls!" he cried, before collapsing. Arik's blade was drawn in an instant, his eyes flashing sharp. Without waiting for orders, he moved toward the danger. His steps, swift and certain, Serenia followed, her heart thundering, torn between fear and awe. As they raced through the corridors, Serenia realized something. The choice Arik made was not in words alone. It was in action. He did not guard treasure, he guarded life. And in that moment she understood. His loyalty was not a chain. It was a shield. And that shield was stronger than anything she had ever owned. The night was not yet over, and the Iayaoi palace would soon run red with battle, but Serenia's heart whispered again, louder this time. This human is not like the others. His choice will change everything. The halls of the Silver Palace still echoed with the clash of steel from the night before. Assassins had crept into the lower chambers, and though Captain Arik fought with the strength of a storm, their presence left a wound deeper than blades. It was not just an attack on Lady Serenia's life. It was an attack on her honor, her rule, and her decision to trust a human. Word spread quickly through the palace, faster than fire in dry grass. Servants whispered in the kitchens. Guards muttered. In the barracks, nobles exchanged sharp glances in the council hall. Every whisper carried the same poison. It is the human's fault. They claimed his presence had attracted danger, that his strange loyalty was only a trick to lower her guard. Some said he let the assassins in. Others swore he planned to betray. Once her trust was fully won. Lady Serenia heard these words in passing, drifting through the marble corridors like smoke. She walked among her people with her chin high, but inside her chest a storm brewed. Doubt was a venom, and though she wanted to believe Arik, the seed of suspicion had already been planted. She remembered his steady eyes, his calm words, his refusal to touch gold, yet doubt whispered, what if it was only an act? What if he waits for the right moment? Arik, meanwhile, carried on with silent discipline. He trained in the yard, his blade cutting through the air with sharp precision. He spoke little, yet his presence was steady, like a rock in a raging river. But he was not deaf. He heard the whispers too, the glances of servants that lingered too long, the hushed tones of guards who stopped talking when he passed. Still, he said nothing, for words could not clear the air as much as actions could. The council, however, was not silent. One evening, Serenia stood before them, the high chamber glowing with crystal light. The nobles wore their finest robes, dripping with chains of gold and sapphires, their eyes sharp with judgment. The human must be dismissed, declared Lord Valar, a man whose greed was older than his bones. He draws danger to our gates, his kind cannot be trusted, another counselor hissed. Their voices rose together like a tide of scorn, pressing Serenia to bend. Serenia's eyes swept across them. None of you stood beside me when the blades came, she said, her voice cold as steel. It was the human who shielded me. It was his blood on the floor, not yours. The council murmured, but their suspicion did not fade. One whispered to another, perhaps he staged the attack himself so he could appear loyal. Another added, what better trick than to bleed for her once, and then strike when she is unguarded? The poison spread deeper. Even Serenia's closest advisor, Lady Arathan, approached her in private. My lady, she said softly, your heart sees only what it wishes, but your mind must see truth. Humans hunger for power, and this one is no different. Serenia turned away, her hands trembling. And if you are wrong, she asked. What then? Arathan bowed, her words sharp as a knife. If I am wrong, then you will be the first ruler in our history saved by a human. But if I am right, then he will be your ruin. That night Serenia walked alone through the palace gardens. The twin moons hung above her, casting silver light on the fountains and flowers. She thought of Arik, sitting quietly at the edge of the training yard, polishing his blade, never asking for more than food and rest. He seemed so unshaken by the riches around him, so unmoved by the weight of gold. And yet, the whispers gnawed at her heart, pulling her in two directions. Trust or doubt, faith or suspicion. Arik found her there, though she had not called for him. My lady, he said with a bow, your steps are heavy tonight. She looked at him, her eyes sharp. Do you know what they say of you? Arik did not flinch. I do, he said simply. They fear what they do not understand. She studied him in silence, searching his face for any crack, any sign of deceit. But his eyes were steady, like a calm sea that refused to storm. Finally, she asked, her voice barely above a whisper, "If I left my life, my crown, my world in your hands, would you betray me?" Arik placed his hand over his heart, his voice quiet but firm. "I swore to protect you not because of your riches, not because of your crown, but because you gave me something no one else has. Trust. Then why do you stay when all others despise you?" She pressed. His lips curved in a faint shadow of a smile. "Because loyalty means little if it runs only with praise. It must also endure whispers and knives." Her breath caught, for his answer was not what she expected. He did not defend himself with promises. He did not beg her to believe. He simply stood there, unshaken, as if the world's judgment meant nothing. In that moment, Serenia felt the doubt within her bend. Though it did not break, she turned away, her robe sweeping across the stone path. "Be careful, Captain," she murmured, "for whispers can turn into blades." As she walked back toward the palace, the shadows seemed to deepen around her. Enemies moved unseen, their plans growing bolder, and though she tried to push the whispers aside, one thought clung to her heart like a thorn. If Arik was truly loyal, then the danger was not him. It was the ones closest to her, and betrayal was already waiting in the dark, ready to strike again. The palace slept under the cover of night, its silver walls glowing faintly beneath the twin moons. Yet the silence was heavy, too heavy, as if the air itself waited for something to break it. Lady Serenia stood at her chamber window, her thoughts tangled like threads. The whispers of betrayal still clung to her mind, sharp as thorns, and though Arik's words had steadied her heart, doubt lingered in the shadows, refusing to leave. Arik himself was awake, patrolling the outer halls. His steps were slow but certain, his hand resting on the hilt of his sword. He trusted little in walls or locked doors, for he knew danger crept where it was least expected. Every flicker of torchlight, every faint creak of stone set his senses on edge. He had lived too long in war to ignore the language of silence. Then it came, the sound of glass shattering, sharp and sudden. Arik's hand was on his blade in an instant. A servant screamed. From the lower corridors, the cry cut short by steel. Shadows moved swiftly across the halls, cloaked figures slipping through like smoke. Their blades gleamed faintly in the torchlight, dripping with poison. "Assassins," Arik hissed under. His breath, he sprinted down the marble steps, his boots pounding like thunder. The intruders had come prepared, their steps soundless, their eyes fixed on one purpose: to end Lady Serenia. Arik's sword flashed, steel clashing against curved daggers. The first assassin fell, a cry spilling from his lips, but more swarmed like wolves. Above, Serenia's guards rushed into formation, but confusion spread quickly. The attack was too sudden, too precise, as if someone from inside had guided them. Serenia stepped back, her heart racing, watching as the assassins cut through the first line of defense. The noble's whispers from earlier rang in her ears. What if Arik brought them here? What if this is his betrayal? But when she looked down, into the courtyard, she saw him, fighting not as a traitor but as a shield. Arik stood against 3 assassins at once, his blade carving arcs of light. He moved like a storm, every strike meant to kill, every motion fueled by iron resolve. He took a dagger across his arm but did not flinch. Instead, he used his wound to pull one assassin closer, driving his knee into the man's chest before finishing him with a swift strike. "Protect the lady," Arik roared to the panicked guards, his voice cutting through fear like fire. The guards obeyed, forming a wall before Serenia. Though their hands shook, Arik fought on, blood dripping from his sleeve, his face a mask of focus. Every swing of his sword carried the weight of his oath, every breath burned with fury. Serenia's chest tightened as she watched. This was no stage display. His wounds were real, his loyalty carved into his very flesh. He bled not for riches, not for power, but for her, Her eyes burned, though she could not tell if it was anger at her own doubt or fear for the man who fought. Below, more assassins poured in, their numbers far greater than expected. The palace halls echoed with screams, with the ring of steel, with the crackle of fire as torches fell. Arik knew he could not hold the line forever. He moved back, step by step, forcing the assassins toward a narrow passage where only two could face him at once. His blade danced with precision, cutting them down one by one, but his strength was not endless, and the wound in his arm slowed him. At last, one assassin slipped past the guards and rushed toward Serenia. His dagger glinted, aimed straight for her throat. For a heartbeat, time froze. Serenia's breath caught, her body stiff with shock. But before the blade could reach her, Arik was there. He threw himself between them, his sword clashing against the assassin's dagger. The impact sent sparks flying, and the dagger carved deep into Arik's side. A cry escaped Serenia's lips, sharp and pained. Arik staggered but did not fall. With one final surge of strength, he disarmed the assassin and drove his blade through the man's chest. Then he dropped to one knee, blood soaking his tunic, his breath ragged. "Are you hurt, my lady?" he asked, his voice strained. Serenia knelt before him, her hands trembling as they pressed against his wound. "No, but you are," she whispered, her voice breaking. The remaining guards rushed in, finally driving the last of the assassins out. The palace was left in ruins, the floor stained with blood, the silence heavy once more. But all Serenia could see was Arik, broken and bleeding. His body slumped, yet his eyes still burning with loyalty. He had shielded her with his own life, proved his oath with blood. And in that moment, all her doubt shattered like glass. She lifted, her gaze, her voice firm though her heart trembled. "To me," she commanded the guards, "carry him to the healing chambers, now." They obeyed, lifting Arik gently, though his face twisted in pain. As they carried him away, Serenia walked beside him, her robe trailing in blood, her mind heavy with a truth she could no longer deny. This man, this human, had risked everything without hesitation. His loyalty had not only saved her life, it had saved her soul from drowning in doubt. And though the palace had survived the night, she knew one thing clearly. The attack had not been about treasure. It had been about her. And the enemy who sent those assassins was not finished yet, but neither was Arik. Even bleeding, even broken, he turned his head slightly toward her as they carried him. His lips curved in the faintest ghost of a smile. "I told you," he whispered. "Gold cannot protect you, but I can." The healing chamber was quiet except for the soft crackle of lamps filled with glowing oils. Arik lay on a stone bed covered with woven silks, his wounds bandaged, his skin pale from blood loss. The healers worked carefully, applying salves that shimmered faintly with alien herbs, but even they whispered doubts. "Why risk so much for a human?" one muttered. "He cannot survive such wounds." Yet Arik's chest rose and fell steadily, his breath slow but strong, like a man too stubborn to let death take him. Lady Serenia stood nearby, her violet eyes fixed on him. Her hands were clenched tightly in front of her, though she tried to hide the trembling. Hours ago she had doubted him, listened to whispers of betrayal, let venom creep into her heart. But when the blade came for her life, it was his body that stood in the way. Now she could not escape the truth. His loyalty was real, carved into flesh and sealed with blood. When the healers left, at last, leaving herbs burning in the corners to keep the air clean, Serenia sat at his side. Her fingers hovered near his hand but did not touch. She had never cared for anyone beyond duty, never let her heart soften. But this man had broken through walls she thought unshakable. For a long time she sat in silence, watching his breath, her chest heavy with words she had buried for too long. At last Arik stirred, his eyes opening slowly, gray and sharp even through pain. "My lady," he whispered, his voice rough as gravel, "are you safe?" Serenia's throat tightened. "You are the one bleeding, yet you ask about me." A faint smile curved his lips. "That was always the duty." Her composure cracked then, and a laugh escaped her, soft but heavy with sorrow. You fool, she whispered, her eyes glistening. You risked everything when you did not have to. Arik's gaze did not waver. I swore an oath, my lady, and oaths mean nothing if broken at the first storm. The words tore at her heart, for she remembered why she had tested him. Slowly, she rose from her chair and walked toward the window, the moonlight spilling across her face. Her voice was quiet but steady. Do you know why I left my riches unguarded that first night? Arik blinked, his brow furrowing. To test me? Yes, she said, turning back to him. Because I thought you were like the others, greedy, unworthy, waiting only for a chance to betray. Her steps were slow as she returned to his bedside, her robe whispering against the floor. I have lived in halls of gold since birth, surrounded by servants who bow with smiles, but reach for what they can steal the moment I turn my back. Her voice cracked, heavy with old scars. I have been guarded by warriors who swore loyalty but sold my secrets for jewels. I have been betrayed by blood and by oath. She sank into the chair again, her eyes fixed on him. So I thought you would be the same. Just another hand waiting to take. Arik's lips parted, but he said nothing, his gaze steady, waiting for her to finish. Her hands trembled as she reached for his, finally letting her fingers brush his rough skin. But you did not. She whispered. You looked at gold and turned away. You bled for me when you could have saved yourself. You gave me something none of my kind ever did. Trust. Arik's breath deepened, his eyes softening. And do you regret testing me? He asked quietly. Serenya's throat tightened. Every moment since, she admitted. Because I realized the test said more about me than it did about you. It showed my fear, my doubt, my weakness. She leaned closer, her voice trembling. And you showed me strength, not in riches, not in crowns, but in loyalty that cannot be bought. The silence between them grew heavy, but it was not the silence of doubt, it was the silence of two truths meeting. For the first time, Serenya allowed her walls to fall, even if only a little. Her voice dropped to a whisper, so soft it might have been mistaken for prayer. I am afraid, she confessed, not of you, but of what you mean. If I trust you, I must turn away from everything I was taught. From every whisper in these halls, from the safety of suspicion. Arik's hand shifted, weak but steady, his fingers curling around hers. Then let the whispers come, he said, his voice rough but firm. I do not need their trust. I need only yours. Her breath caught, her heart hammering in her chest. She had not known fear like this, not fear of blades, not fear of death, but fear of letting her heart be touched. Yet as she looked at him, broken and bleeding yet unshaken, she knew there was no turning back. This human had not only saved her life, he had torn open a door she could never close again. The night stretched long, the lamps burning low. Serenya remained by his side, her confession heavy in the air between them. She had revealed her scars, and in doing so she had bound her fate to his. For trust, once given, could not be taken back. And though danger still lurked in the shadows of her palace, the real battle now burned within her heart. A battle between fear and faith, between doubt and love. And as Arik drifted back into sleep, his hand still holding hers, Serenya whispered, to the silence, You are not my servant. You are not my guard. You are something far more dangerous. You are my choice. The council chamber was alive with murmurs, voices hissing like snakes beneath the vaulted ceiling. Light from crystal lamps spilled across polished floors, casting reflections from the nobles' jeweled robes. Lady Serenya sat upon her throne at the far end, her posture regal though her heart was heavy. Behind her, guards stood in rigid silence. But all eyes were drawn to one figure standing at the center of the hall. Captain Arik. He still bore the marks of his wounds, his arm bandaged, his side bound tight. Yet his stance was straight and unyielding. The nobles looked at him not with respect but with suspicion sharpened into blades. For days the whispers had grown louder, and now the council had called for a decision. Would Serenya keep her human protector or cast him aside to preserve tradition and silence doubt? Lord Valar was the first to speak, his voice thin but cutting. "My lady, this man bleeds well." "I grant him that, but wounds do not erase the truth," he sneered. "His kind are greedy, dangerous, unfit to stand beside a throne." Another noble, Lady Arathan, added quickly, her tone smooth yet cruel. "Already assassins breach our walls, already whispers of betrayal spread through the streets, and who stands at the center of it all? The human." The chamber echoed with murmurs of agreement, the nobles leaning forward like wolves circling. Pray Serenya's gaze remained steady, but inside her chest the storm raged. She knew the truth of Arik's loyalty. She had felt it in his blood, seen it in his wounds, yet the weight of her people's judgment pressed down like chains. If she defied the council, she risked rebellion. But if she dismissed him, she would lose the only shield she truly trusted. At last, the High Chancellor, a man older than any present, raised his staff for silence. "My lady," he said gravely, "we do not question your wisdom, but we question the risk. A single human cannot outweigh centuries of tradition. Dismiss him, and you keep peace. Keep him, and you invite ruin, the wise." Words fell heavy, the chamber quiet now. Every noble leaning forward to hear her answer. Arik stepped forward, his voice calm, though the weight of the moment pressed upon him. "My lady," he said, his tone carrying across the hall, "if my presence brings you trouble, I will go. My oath was to protect you, not to chain you with doubt." The noble smirked at his words, satisfied that he would take the blame, but Serenya's chest tightened, her hands gripping the arms of her throne. She could see the honesty in his eyes, the quiet strength of a man willing to walk away if it would spare her. And it was that very willingness that broke the last wall within her heart. "No," Serenya said, her voice firm, echoing across the chamber. The nobles stirred, shocked at the sharpness of her tone. She rose from her throne, her robes flowing like a river of violet silk, her eyes blazing like twin flames. "You ask me to dismiss him because he is human, because you fear what you do not understand," she said, her words slicing through the air. "But when blades came for me, it was not you who stood in the way, it was him. When blood was spilled, it was his, not yours." Murmurs filled the hall, but she silenced them with a single raised hand. "You measure loyalty in jewels and promises, but I have seen loyalty written in scars. I have seen trust forged in pain. I will not dismiss him, because he has given me what none of you ever did. Faith without price." The council erupted into chaos, voices shouting, some furious, some fearful, a few silent in awe. Lord Velar slammed his fist against the table. "This is madness," he shouted. "You would risk a kingdom for the word of a human." Serenya turned her gaze on him, cold as ice. "I would risk nothing because this human has already proven what none of you can. He values my life above all treasure." Her words struck like thunder, silencing even the boldest voices. For the first time in years, the nobles saw not just their lady, but a ruler who would not bend to their chains. Arik stood in silence, his face unreadable, though his heart pounded within his chest. He had been ready to walk away, yet she had chosen him not for duty, not for wealth, but because she believed. The High Chancellor finally rose again, his old eyes narrowing. "Then so be it," he said softly, though his tone carried warning. "But mark my words, my lady. This choice will change everything, and not all will stand with you." He struck his staff once, and the nobles filed out, their robes whispering against the marble floor, their eyes burning with resentment. When the chamber emptied, silence fell like a cloak. Serenya stepped down from her throne, walking slowly toward Arik. Her gaze softened, though her voice trembled with the weight of what had just passed. "They would have me cast you aside," she whispered. "But I cannot. Not after what you have done. Not after what you mean." Arik bowed his head, his voice quiet. "You have chosen a storm, my lady." She lifted his chin gently, her eyes locking with his. "Then let the storm come," she said, her voice fierce. "For I would rather face it with you than hide behind false allies." The chamber lay empty, but the choice had been made. The human would remain, not as a servant, but as something greater. And though Serenia knew the price of her defiance would soon come, she felt lighter, her heart unshackled for the first time in years. For in choosing Arik, she had chosen more than loyalty. She had chosen trust and perhaps even love. The days that followed the council meeting were filled with tension. The nobles moved like shadows through the palace, their voices polite but their eyes sharp. Rumors spread across the city like wildfire, whispers of rebellion, whispers of betrayal, whispers that their lady had lost her mind for the sake of a human. Yet Serenia walked with her head high, her step steady, her choice unshaken. Arik remained close. Though his wounds still ached beneath the bandages, he moved with quiet strength, never far from her side. But he noticed the stares, the servants who looked away too quickly, the guards who whispered when they thought he could not hear. He did not care for their hatred, only for the safety of the woman he had sworn to protect. One evening, Serenia summoned him to the palace balcony. The twin moons shone above, painting the silver walls in pale light. From below, the city stretched wide, its streets alive with faint sounds of music and trade. Yet an undercurrent of unease lingered. "Do you see it?" she asked softly, her eyes on the horizon. Arik followed her gaze. "I see a people who do not trust me," he said plainly. Serenia turned to him, her violet eyes burning. "They do not trust you because you are human, because you are different, but I chose you because you are different." She stepped closer, her voice low, trembling with unspoken truth. "They measure worth in jewels, in crowns, in empty oaths, but you," her voice caught, "you gave me something beyond riches. You gave me loyalty without a price." Arik bowed his head, his voice rough. "And would you risk your crown for that?" Her lips curved into a shadow of a smile. "I already have." The following dawn, Serenia called her people to the grand square before the palace. The nobles gathered at the front, their jeweled robes gleaming, their faces masked with false calm. Behind them stood thousands of citizens, curious, fearful, waiting to hear why their lady defied tradition. At the center of it all, Serenia stood tall, Arik beside her, a living symbol of her choice. "My people," she began, her voice clear, carrying across the crowd. "You have heard the whispers, you have heard the doubts, you have heard the fears, and now I will speak the truth." The crowd fell silent, their eyes fixed on her. "This man," she said, pointing to Arik, "is human, yes, but he has given me more than any noble, more than any guard, more than any ally ever has. He gave me his blood to shield my life. He gave me his trust when all others gave me lies." Gasps rippled through the crowd, nobles shifting uneasily, but Serenia pressed on, her voice rising. "You say he is greedy, yet I left my treasures before him and he did not touch a single coin. You say he is dangerous, yet when blades came for me he faced them alone. You say he is unworthy, but I say he is worth more than all the gold in this kingdom." The nobles muttered in outrage, but Serenia's words struck the citizens like lightning. For years they had watched their leaders bathe in wealth while giving little in return, and now their lady spoke of loyalty, of trust, of a bond beyond riches. Her courage lit a fire in their hearts, though fear still clung at the edges. Lord Valar stepped forward, his face red with fury. "You disgrace your crown," he shouted. "You would throw away centuries of rule for the sake of a human shield." Serenia's gaze cut through him like a blade. "I would throw away nothing, but I will not throw away the one soul who has proven himself true." Arik stepped forward then, his voice calm though the weight of thousands pressed on him. "I did not come here to steal. I did not come here to rule. I came only to protect. But if my presence offends you, I will walk away." The crowd stirred, for his words carried no pride, only truth. Serenia's heart clenched, her voice fierce as she turned to the people. "No," she declared, "he will not walk away, because I will not let him. He is not my servant. He is not my tool. He is my choice, and I stand by that choice." Silence fell, thick and heavy, until at last a single voice from the crowd shouted, "Long live Our Lady." Then another, "Long live the Human Protector." The cry spread, echoing through the square, until the air shook with the voices of thousands. The nobles paled, their power shaken, for they had lost the hearts of the people in a single moment. Serenia turned to Arik, her eyes softening. "You see," she whispered, "it is not riches that bind them, it is truth." Arik's lips curved into the faintest smile, "And you gave them that truth." As the crowd roared, Serenia felt the weight of her choice settle fully upon her shoulders. She had defied her council, risked her throne, and tied her fate to a human, but in doing so she had found something greater than gold, greater than crowns, greater than power. She had found trust, loyalty, and perhaps even love. That night, as the palace quieted and the moons climbed higher, Serenia and Arik stood together on the balcony once more. The wind carried the faint cheers still echoing from the city. The sound of a people stirred. Serenia turned to him, her voice barely, more than a breath. "Whatever storm comes, we will face it together." Arik bowed his head, his eyes steady. Together. And in that single word, Serenia knew the truth of her own heart. The riches of her world could be stolen, the crown could be lost, the halls of silver could fall to ruin. But the bond she had chosen, the bond she had tested, endured, and finally embraced, was beyond riches, beyond fear, beyond betrayal. It was a bond that no blade could sever, a bond that would change everything,